Hello, everybody. We are so excited to launch once again our podcast and be with you all. We want to bring some segments to you all on being mentally healthy and how do we sustain a healthy mind and keeping ourselves healthy body, soul, spirit. We're going to be talking about the soul, we're going to be talking about the spirit, and we're also going to be talking about the body. They're all connected, they're all intertwined. You cannot separate one from the other. I want to come today in this moment together, and I wanted to get you thinking about the word grief. A lot of times we are grieving, and we don't really quite know that we're grieving. We don't understand it. We say things like, I'm hurt, or we say things like, so and so hurt me and I'm trying to get over it. And we don't really realize that oftentimes we're carrying grief from a past trauma, grief from a loss in the past, grief that maybe somebody brought into our lives, and we're carrying around with it still. And I want to come in the next 10 minutes to get you thinking about this topic of grief. We're going to be doing some segments. It is my desire to see you healthy, healthy in the mind, healthy in your soul, because if you can maintain that healthy state, anything that's healthy will always grow. So grief is very important to talk about because we understand that grief has stages, but it's not limited to just those stages. There's a lot of stages to grief, and I want to point out one stage today. I want to highlight something important because I think we all are grieving in some form or some fashion. We have grieved over a loss maybe in the past, and it's important for us to address it. Grief turns out to be something that it's not necessarily a state, but it's a process. We have to know how to process grief. Grief is like a winding road. I once heard it like this: grief is like a winding road. Think about that. And a winding road has bends, right? And each bend starts to reveal something new. You maybe at a bend in the road, you see to the right, it's very green, it's lush. And then the bend to the left, it's just deserty. And grief is like that. It's like a winding road. And sometimes it reveals dry place. It reveals a beautiful place sometimes. But grief, you never know in grief, necessarily. It's just kind of like what we don't know what to expect sometimes as we're going through this process of grieving. We don't know sometimes what is going to pop up in a grieving process. So it's important for us to process pain, pain of loss. Uh, Grief comes because we've lost something. Think about the things that you've lost in the last year. And all of us have lost something. We have all lost family members. We have lost maybe careers, positions. We've lost friends. We've lost people, family members. And so grief is important for us to address and talk about the stages of grief. What are these stages of grief? This segment is not necessarily a prescription, right? But it is here to help you and serve you, to help you even identify some of the things that are happening inside. One of the things that I've learned over the years about grief is that you don't necessarily stay in one stage. It's so easy to go, okay, well, I'm on stage one or stage two, stage three, four, five, etc. But I find that with grief, you can go from stage one to stage two to stage three, and it feels like you're making progress. And then you're like, whoa, I'm back at stage one. And that does not mean that you are not becoming healed. It just means that it's a winding road and it's got a bend. And you might find yourself in stage one, stage two, stage three, oh, stage five. I see the light at the end of the tunnel. And then all of a sudden, you're at stage one and you're going, I'm going backwards. You're not going backwards. It's just part of your grieving process. So please understand that. Now, let's talk about one of the stages of grief that I find myself still having to deal with, and it's anger. I want to talk about anger. Anger is an emotion that we all have had. And let me tell you, I've had my share of anger. And sometimes we think of anger as, these external outbursts that we have, but that's not necessarily the case. We can actually suppress anger, but anger is actually part of a grieving process. When you're grieving the loss of something, when you're still grieving and you're trying to process pain or hurt or an emotion, anger is a phase. It's part of the grieving process. We will all face it. There's times when anger, rises up within us. And sometimes anger has to do with blame. We're blaming something, we're blaming somebody. Often it's easier to be mad, right? Let me say it like this: it's easier to be mad than sad. It's easier. I would rather be angry than to be sad. I would rather be angry, go hit something, go do some kickboxing. Because let me tell you, today's workout was crazy. I had those girls kickboxing and I'm like screaming a fit. Little did they know that I needed to get anger out. That is a great strategy because it's easier to be angry than sad, right? Nobody wants to be sad. Nobody wants to be gloomy or depressed. I would rather be angry. It's easier. And sometimes when we have anger, and that's part of a grieving process, is that we have to put the blame somewhere. It's so and so's fault. It's God's fault. It's, my fault. If this is how God treats us, then what's the point in serving God anyway? Anger is hurt that's internalized. That's what it is. Anger is hurt internalized. Anger keeps us hopeless. It keeps us helpless. Somebody didn't do something and it causes anger. Sometimes we sit in anger, and anger was never meant to be sat with. It's meant to propel you to action. It's meant for you to do something. Anger and anxiety is like pushing gas on, and you're pushing the gas in your car, but you're on park. You're just burning the engine and you're going absolutely nowhere. Do you have anger? Have you hidden the anger? You can't hide anger and you can't hide bitterness either. You will either suppress it, you will repress it, or you will cover it up. You will camouflage it, keep it down as far as you can for as long as you can. But anger cannot be hidden. Anger is not some little emotion that you can pass off, because when it reaches certain stages, it is devastating and it has devastating effects in your life. It can affect your digestive system, your respiratory system, your circulatory system. It can affect every system in your body, and all of that is affected by anger. And so there's a common thread in people who are trying to deal with anger inappropriately. And sometimes it's a violent emotion. Sometimes it comes up in different ways. There's so many forms of this anger. What is anger? Anger is a feeling of sudden and strong displeasure and an antagonism that is directed against a person, or it's directed towards a cause and that we assume was wronged. We were wronged. It was an injury that we suffered. It was a pain that we suffered. We feel like it's unjust. It's a strong displeasure. It's this really strong feeling. Anger is very dangerous if you do not put it in its rightful place, if you don't do something with it. Because when we suppress it and oppress it, anger is dangerous because it can affect us physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. Anger can be a deadly emotion if we do not deal with it. We want to do something about the anger that we're feeling. Do you feel angry still about a situation? Do you find yourself still feeling angry? Anger comes up, and anger is not necessarily a sin. It's what we do with the anger. Uncontrolled anger, controlled anger, both are dangerous, right? There's various kinds of anger. We can have rage, outburst. Me personally, I need to get it out. I become aggressive. I need to go and punch something. I'm angry. You need to acknowledge the anger. Say that you're feeling it. Begin to speak those words out of your mouth. I'm angry. Why are you angry? Get it out. Stop suppressing anger. Recognize one thing. It is part of my grieving process. I'm not going to stay in anger. It's not going to lead me to sin. I recognize it's there and I need to do something about it. I hope this segment helped you. We want to see you free and we want to see you healthy and dealing with this grieving process.